Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. We have a special treat for this episode. Now, if I was saying that to my 6-year-old, that would mean we're having cookies. Unfortunately, no cookies today. But what we do have, cookies. Yes, absolutely. What we do have is my good friend and business partner, Dr. Jeremy Weisz. We are flipping the script, and he is going to be interviewing me. But let me say a word or two about Jeremy. For those of you who don't know him, hopefully you've checked out his podcast, Inspired Insider. He is an amazing interviewer. I really can't set the bar high enough for how incredible what you're about to listen to is going to be. I mean, if Terry Press and Larry King and the Energizer Bunny had a baby, it would be Jeremy Weisz. He is the world's best at this. So if your expectations aren't high enough, I want you to elevate them even higher, because you are in for a treat. Jeremy, I'm going to turn it over to you, and please shed some light on all of us.
I mean, the key to being a good interviewer is having good guests. Then you don't have to be that good.
Oh, you're too kind. And preparation, but that's okay. That's a minor detail.
It's choosing the guests and preparation. Yeah, exactly. But the bar is set way too high. But I'm excited because we are going to talk about kind of a year in review. A year in review of some of the top 100, entrepreneurs, founders, leaders that you've had on your podcast. And before we talk about that and dig into the conversations, the episode is brought to you by Rise25. And this is how I always explain it to people, John. I say, what we do is we help you connect your dream 100 relationships for your business. And, we do that by helping you run your podcast. We are an easy button for a business to launch and run a podcast, but so it serves them and their relationships. And, we've in our lives, the number one thing in our lives is relationships. And so we're always looking a way to give to our relationships. And I've seen no better way over the past 10 years to give to my relationships, profile my friends, the people I admire, the companies I admire, and have them, giving them a platform to talk about what they do. So if you've thought about starting a podcast, and we believe every business, just like you have a website, you should have a podcast. If you've thought about it, check out rise25.com. We put out constant content about it. If you have questions, you can email us anytime. We help businesses launch and run podcasts. So let's talk, John. And, you made a decision this past year, and I said 100. Typically, it's not 100.
No.
So why 100?
Well, in fact, let me first say 1 year, it was only 7. It was actually only 7 episodes published. I actually had many more conversations than that, but this is going back to the beginning of our business partnership. When we started a business, we weren't in the podcasting space. We were mostly doing live events. In 1 year, I only put out 7 episodes because I was too stuck in the weeds on it. And you actually helped me. I said at the end of the year, I was like, Jeremy, you obviously put out all these episodes. How do I do what you do? You helped me revamp the process, and I put out 52 episodes the next year. But you're right. Most years since that point going forward, I put out 52 episodes or so, give or take, maybe a few fewer if I took some holidays or vacation or something like that. But, about a year's worth, one a week. But this past year, March of 2020, we all know what happened. COVID hit, global pandemic. And, companies were shutting down right and left. People were scared. People were uncertain. They didn't know what was going to happen. I certainly had no crystal ball. Didn't know what to do. But at that point in time, I made what I think was, kind of a brave decision. I said, well, when the SHIT has hit the fan for me in the past in my business, and you're talking to a guy who worked for a president who was impeached and a governor who was recalled. So I've had ups and downs in my careers like anyone. What I've leaned on is relationships. And so I made the decision that I was going to invest back in doing more of the podcast, not less. You see many podcasts that gave up at that point, but I said, I'm going to do more. And so I doubled down. I started putting out 2 episodes a week instead of 1. So rather than building relationships with 50 amazing people or 52 amazing people, 1 a week, it ended up being over 100. And as a result, the amazing thing about it is our business grew substantially through a pandemic. And, there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of businesses that are suffering out there. I don't want to minimize that. But I do want to say that when you double down your relationships, it makes a huge impact.
So I want to highlight some of the top lessons you learned from some episodes. And I'm going to start off with, I think, Craig Weisz.
Okay.
So the interview with Craig Weisz, what was a lesson from Craig that you remember?
Well, the funny thing about Craig is that he tells this story, and it's really great. I reached out to him because we were in the process of writing a book, and I reached out to him and said, I wanted to feature you in this book. And he ended up responding. And the way he tells it is, I don't usually respond to people reaching out on LinkedIn cold, but for some reason I thought, okay, I'll do this. So he reached back out to me. We scheduled a time to talk. I interviewed him, took notes, included in the book. And then at the end of the interview, he said, so what do you do? And I explained, what I do is we help people to use feature interviews, in our case, primarily for a podcast. And I ended up repurposing that interview also for the podcast. And we reach out to people, and we help people to do that, and then feature them in interviews, and then use that as a tool for ROI clients and referral partnerships. And he said, so basically exactly what you just did to me. And so but then he left because he ended up becoming a client. So he said, well, I'm going to take that and I'm going to do it too. You can't beat him, join him, I guess, is kind of the approach to it. But Craig is an amazing guy because he, like me, is a recovering lawyer. And he had an opportunity to join a really fast growing startup that ended up, it was a family business, I believe, at the time. And it wasn't growing as much as it could. He ended up becoming CEO, and under his leadership, in about a 3-year period of time, went from about $10 million valuation to over $1 billion valuation. And they raised, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars of funding and all this kind of stuff. And so the lesson I take from that is to be open to new opportunities, to be willing to make a dramatic change. Because he was a guy who, I think he was doing patent law or something like that, IP law. And he made this major shift going and being a CEO of this fast growing startup. And it ended up working out really, really, really well for him. So I think that was a big takeaway from that particular interview.
Jeff Prager.
And,
yeah.
How to Engineer Your Cash Flow Using 7 Simple Numbers. Great book, great guidance. And he, ended up helping us with figuring out, what key KPIs we should really be paying attention to. And his message is kind of like, you've got all these different accounting statements, income statement, P&Ls, things like that. But really, it just boils down to 7 numbers that you should be tracking. And so for me, that was the big takeaway.
So that's how good of an interviewer you could be. If you do research, you have a good guest. I could just say Jeff Prager, and then you just talk.
Right.
Tommy Mello.
Tommy is an amazing guy. He starts a business that is focused on one simple thing: garage doors. And they're so passionate about helping homeowners to switch out their garage doors and improve the curb appeal of their home. And that is what they do. And he took it up to like a $30-40 million business. They're on their way towards $100 million business. So for me, the big takeaway from that one was pick your lane, stay within that lane, and do it really, really well and really double down on it.
Do you remember what is their value proposition? Was it making the garage look better? What is their unique selling proposition for the company?
I'm probably going to butcher it, but really, I think it was about curb appeal. It was about being proud of the home that you live in. And he had some statistic. It was something like 45% of your curb appeal is all wrapped up in the garage door.
It's big real estate, actually. If you think about the face of a house.
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
thinking about it because, in business, we all like to serve big pain points.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you or anyone has ever had their garage door stop working. It's like life shuts down. You can't get the car out of the garage.
Yeah.
It's an emergency.
Yeah. It just happened to us the other day.
Or flip side, it doesn't go down.
Yeah.
You could probably pull it down, but someone can get in their house. They can get all your bikes. They
stuff
can
in the
get
garage.
They can get everything, all your
Exactly, right.
junk.
Right.
So, anyways, he has some big pain points that he serves. Also, besides the curb appeal.
Yeah.
Sky Fernandez.
I love what he did because Sky Fernandez is a venture capitalist. And what he did was a little bit unusual. So he started basically a school, a training program for how to break into and become a venture capitalist. And what's really cool about that is, I'm sure it's hugely time consuming to do this. And it, brings a lot of your attention to that new entity, basically. But now he's at this point where he has hundreds of former students that are now at other VC funds all around Silicon Valley, San Francisco. And all these people are his biggest champions, his biggest fans, and they're looking out for him, and they bring him deals, they bring him investment opportunities. So it ended up being a really good benefit for him. That's a big takeaway for me from that interview.
What I like about also podcasting, I was talking to someone, John, that we just started working with, and they just started doing interviews, and they were telling me a couple of the people who said yes to be guests and also ones they had just done. And they were so excited about the stories because you get to talk to some really amazing people.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I always love hearing these stories. Chris Townsend McDonald.
Now I reached out to him. I don't remember how I came across him, but he was like really early into podcasting. And, the reason I reached out to him because, he's really well connected. He was there in the early days. And just since our business is focused on that now, I wanted to be able to talk to him and hear about what it was like. So he started the B2B corporate division at Libsyn early on, worked with some of the biggest names, biggest companies that were breaking into podcasting. And, he also had worked in the music industry, and now he's in agriculture. He's a lawyer like me, former lawyer like me. And so I think the lesson from that one is just looking for new opportunities, looking for new offerings, being willing to try something completely new, including a brand new industry. And then when you're in that industry, then looking for opportunities within that industry, like starting a corporate division, an enterprise division within the company Libsyn that he was at the time.
There's another one that a mutual friend, Adam Whitty.
Yeah, he was great. So Adam is someone that you've known for a long time and someone that I'd been thinking about interviewing for a long time. And finally, I'm glad that in 2020, I had the chance to do that. What's really cool, what I loved asking him about is I love asking people about what's it like when you go from admiring a mentor from afar, someone you're learning from, maybe an author or speaker or something like that, to actually getting to know them, to actually befriending them, learning from them personally, and getting to know them on a more personal level. So that's what he did. He ended up buying his mentor's business, Dan Kennedy. And so he had learned from Dan from afar, and then determined that he was going to become the star student. He ends up buying all of his books, going really deep with his programs, joining his different programs, building relationship with him. And then finally, after a number of years, had the opportunity to purchase his business and basically go into partnership with him. So that was really cool to see that sort of thing happen. It doesn't happen to everyone, obviously, but it's really cool when it does.
Yeah. GKIC, Glazer Kennedy Inner Circle, he has now rebranded it as Magnetic Marketing. And a lot of the top direct response marketers on the planet credit learning from Dan Kennedy.
Yeah.
A lot of, I don't know if all roads lead back to Dan Kennedy, but a lot of roads lead back to Dan Kennedy. Some of the top business people said, I learned from Dan Kennedy. I had in chiropractic school, I had the magnetic marketing cassette tapes from Dan Kennedy that I was listening to. So I remember I had that stuff. Their copy is so compelling. As a broke student, I was buying their stuff. Okay. Jason Swank.
Jason, Jason he'd attended a reception we organized at a conference maybe about 3 years ago now. And I don't remember what inspired me to reach out to interview him. We published this episode in April of 2020, and so many great things led to it, led from it. He's become a great referral partner for us. We've referred many people to him. I tell people about his podcast all the time. You've listened to every single episode. I'm not too far behind you. We ended up joining his community, doing coaching with him, telling others about his community. And so it was amazing looking back at the year and realizing April was when I interviewed him, and you have also interviewed him, and so I was so grateful again that I doubled the output this year, that because maybe if I wasn't doing more than one a week, I wouldn't have interviewed him. Right. And that all those opportunities that flowed
half the people
from that.
You would not
exactly,
have interviewed.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So I was just so glad that I did.
Yeah. I love Jason's stuff, and it's I don't know how many episodes he has at this point, maybe 400 or something. I have listened to maybe 395 of them. I haven't maybe listened to the last 5.
You're slacking.
But
You're slacking. You got to catch up.
Chris
Dreyer, the master of SEO. I love the way how giving he is with his wisdom, constantly sharing. Again, we're in some communities that he belongs to as well, and I see him sharing his wisdom. He's also someone that, what I've learned from him is that he's someone who isn't afraid to say, I'm the best at what I do, and we're going to charge top dollar, but it's going to be worth it for you. You are going to be glad that you're paying top dollar for us, who is the best at what we do. And I love that kind of confidence. And so that's a big lesson that I've taken from him.
Yeah, actually, he posted something on social media. There was a Mr. Swagger magazine, and he was on the cover of it. So it goes to say,
there
and
you go.
I think I called him up. This was the other week, and I said, "Hey, Mr. Swagger." so it goes into what you learn from him, I guess.
That's a level of confidence that I just don't think I'm predisposed towards.
He's not cocky or anything. He's a humble, super nice person, but confident in what he does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it goes back to something I said earlier, kind of staying within your lane, deciding the lane that you're going to choose and then being the best at that.
Totally. Taylor Trusty.
These questions are just so compelling. You just draw me
I don't even, it's just like I try and say the least number of words possible.
Taylor, what an interesting guy. So another guy is really active in EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, friends with Sam London and Chad Rubin, also guests on the podcast. What's really cool about him is he built an agency out of Louisville, Kentucky, which is where he's from, It's
Louisville. If you're from Louisville, it's called Louisville. But if you're not from Louisville, I lived for a year in Louisville.
So you can say it that way.
If people live there or from there, they say Louisville. If someone who's not, they say Louisville. So
got it. Okay, good.
Anyways.
I feel like I'm making fun of them if I say Louisville.
It's kind of, no, that's how they say it, Louisville.
Okay, well, I'll say it like someone who lives in California. So anyways, he lives in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm sure that it's like, I live outside of San Francisco. People hate it. The San Franciscans hate it when you say SF or Frisco. It drives them bonkers. So that's probably what I've just done with all those Kentuckians.
Exactly.
Anyway, so Taylor, great lesson there is he was recruiting this, great talent bench to join his company out of the university there, and paying them what was a good wage for Louisville, and they ended up being acquired, not necessarily because of their body of work, although I'm sure that has something to do with it. But a big part of it was that they had this talent pipeline built in Louisville, Kentucky. So I think their acquirer was from Boston, Massachusetts, and that was a big factor for them. So the lesson for me from that was you're something that, makes your business really valuable, maybe something that's surprising or unexpected. So start thinking about those things in a conscious way so that you can continue to develop those types of attributes for your company.
Yeah. I mean, talent is huge. And I was talking to someone in private equity. I interviewed someone this morning, and he was saying when they acquire a company, that they look at the talent And some of the people companies they've acquired have, risen up in the organization and become leaders in their private equity company. Right. So it's really key, the people.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the interview piece. And we'll talk about Russ and Rise25, but a shout out, Andrew Warner, I learned a lot from, and I've studied a lot of the top interviewers to see what they do. And one of my favorites is Nardwuar. And most people have never heard of Nardwuar. Some of the best, most compelling interviews you'll ever watch, in my opinion, and you may start to binge watch them on YouTube. And I won't even spoil it, but he's interviewed some of the top people in the music industry. And so I watch all of his interviews. I study his interviews, how he interviews, what he does. He's interviewed Snoop Dogg probably like 4 times, the whole Wu-Tang Clan, a lot of the big music artists have been interviewed by Nardwuar. And so, so anyways, I study a lot of these people, and everyone has their own style.
Yeah.
Right. So,
well, I mean, I'm making fun of you for the short questions.
No, I think I should be made fun of.
No, the truth is, though, I mean, if you do study really good interviewers, sometimes their questions aren't full questions. They're just a statement, which then encourages the guest to respond further. Or it's an observation. It doesn't have to be a fully formed question. And I think that's a great point.
He does a lot of research on his guests I don't even know how he does all his research, but he'll hold up a poster. He'll bring a poster as a gift to one of the Wu-Tang Clan members who he knows has serious significance for this person. And he'll just hold it up and go, what does this mean to you? And the person will go and tell a real personal story, but it's because he did a lot of research. He doesn't have to say much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Sam London, Chad Rubin.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned them in the context of Taylor. Yeah. But they both good guests, good friends. I think the lesson of them.
Have you had Chad on before?
I have. Yeah.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one.
I think the lesson behind that is, and Taylor actually, I think Taylor came through Sam, or I know they're good friends. But the lesson behind, those guys is to just keep, to not forget to continue to double down on your existing relationships. One mistake I've made in doing the podcast at times has been to go and interview someone I've never met before, who may be good or may not be good, but at the sacrifice of not spending an hour talking to someone who is a champion, who is a friend, who's a referral partner, is someone who you could get to know better. And so oftentimes the best thing you can do is double down on your existing relationships, by featuring them on your podcast, getting to know them on a much deeper level, telling the world, or at least your audience, about them. And I think that's a great thing to do.
Yeah. Chad's company, Skubana. If you are in e-commerce, check it out. And he was a Sherpa at one of our events. And I think that's how you first got to know him.
Yeah, actually, it was.
In Austin, Texas.
Yeah, exactly.
Russ Rosenzweig.
So Russ went to University of Chicago, I believe, got his MBA from there. And they ended up starting this business called Roundtable Group. And the idea was to take experts who are mostly toiling away in academia and not getting the recognition that they deserve, and to give them representation and to help give them, more commercial opportunities by representing them. And then they saw an opportunity. They saw that there was a big need, particularly in the legal field, in the context of pending litigation or actual litigation, active disputes. So they saw an opportunity there, and they went really deep on that. And the funny thing is, so they ended up building it up, selling it then, which ended up being a publicly traded company that had it, which then ended up letting it kind of wither. I don't know what word I'm looking for. Wither. Thank you. Wither on the vine.
You're asking a biochemistry major about the stuff that's
atrophy. Is that the word I'm looking
atrophy?
for?
I like that word.
Okay. Yeah. So it atrophied, if that's a word. And then that publicly traded company wasn't so interested in it anymore, and they ended up selling it. So Russ says, I believe in selling high, buying low. So they ended up buying it back And now the original management team ownership group is back running
Wow.
it again, and they love it. So that's really cool. So the lesson there is look for those types of opportunities, and you never know when they may come
It's
up.
to sell, have it wither away, then buy it back and build it up again, sell it again.
Exactly right.
I like hearing about the non-sexy businesses, because if you serve a pain point, it could go across any industry. So
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a take home when I listened to that one is who would have thought just to serve that niche? It's like a niche within a niche within a niche, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have Fran Biederman Gross, who I also interviewed. He has some cool stories about working with Jay-Z's company. But what was your
they've worked with
takeaway?
some really cool companies. She wrote How to Lead a Values-Based Professional Services Firm with her co-author, Don Scales. And she later hired us to launch her podcast. But the time I interviewed her, that wasn't the case. And we just had a great connection. She's active in EO New York, which I think is how we connected. She was really inspired by Simon Sinek, who's famous for saying start with why. And her whole business is around helping other businesses to figure out their why and figure out how to infuse that in everything that they do. Everything, whether it's recruiting talent, retaining talent, getting clients, all that kind of thing. And it's more important than ever. There's all kinds of public opinion surveys these days that say that employees are looking to work for a company that has a larger purpose, and they want to know what that is. And also consumers, when they purchase, they want to know that they're doing business with the company, what their purpose is, and so I think that it's really important for companies to think that through.
I'm a huge avid Audible reader. And the next person you add on, I may have listened to all of his books. Maybe there's 6 of them. I don't remember how many. Mike Michalowicz.
Yeah, great guy. I interviewed him for the second time this year because he had a book coming out. So I was happy to feature him on my podcast again. It's a great opportunity to reconnect with someone you haven't talked to in a while. I've been participating in EO Accelerator for the last few years, a wonderful program, and been really influential. And the whole EO program is a big fan of Mike's work. And his programs are, his books and everything are really revered in that program. And so that's, simple reason why I interviewed him. And I also read his book. Oh God, I'm blanking on the name of it, but the one about
the pumpkin plan?
No, about maximizing your cash flow. Cash comes first or something like that. Something along those lines. Profit first. Thank you. Which is a really counterintuitive approach to managing your cash flow, especially for small businesses. And he's, he doesn't have a background as a CPA or anything like that. And it was kind of a book and an idea that he mentioned in a couple talks, and people were just inspired by it. It really lit a fire under them. So he realized that there was something there. He ends up writing a book about it. So I'd highly recommend that book to people.
Yeah, all of his books are good. Everyone should check out his books. I think of the pumpkin plan a lot. I don't know if you ever listened to it, but it's basically how the opposite of an ADD entrepreneur. That's why I like it. I'm like, I need it to slap me down sometimes, but it makes sense if you have all of these, whatever it is, take pumpkins, and you have small, medium, and large, and they're all feeding from this trunk or whatever. If you cut off the smaller ones and let all of the energy go to the larger one, it's going to get way bigger and grow. And it's kind of what we discuss in our business a lot, which is don't get distracted with all these things. Really feed the thing that should be fed and focus.
Easy to say, hard to do for most business owners, totally. I think. Yeah.
And the next is about thought leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you and I made a decision in June of this past year to start doing regular weekly thought leadership episodes. We don't do them every week, but we try to, usually as a LinkedIn Live that we also publish as a podcast episode. And it goes back to what we espouse to people is that use a podcast also as a tool for sharing your wisdom. I've been guilty for many years of not doing enough of that. If you you do want to put the spotlight on your guests and highlight them and feature them and tell the world about them. But you also want to use it as an opportunity to share a bit of your wisdom, because you're building trust with your audience, and some of those people will want to know more about you, and they'll want to know about, services that you provide or ways in which they can work with you. So we started doing those episodes, sharing our wisdom, sharing our ideas, and you start to build a body of work. We could take what we did in a half a year and we could package it up. It could be a book. It could be, we did create a course this year. So it's a lot of different things that it could be. But I think when you give away your philosophy, your approach, your best strategies, when you share that wisdom with the world, they're going to be people who, then they want to do work with you. It's, some people are fearful that if you do that, then you're going to lose a bunch of business. We haven't found that to be the case.
Totally. This is one, that actually, I remember when I was working with Mixergy, he may have had Derek Sivers on, 9 years ago, or I don't know, however long ago.
Yeah.
So he's pretty recent.
He's known for CD Baby, and he's someone I've known of, probably for 10 years. And I don't know what inspired me this year to reach out. I think I was just on his website one day, and there was an email address, and he said, you can reach out. So I reached out and just said, hey, I'd love to interview you.
It's funny because, probably the people you have on, some of the people I have, and they go, how did you get that person? I go, I emailed them.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I wish I
Right.
had some crazy extravagant story. Obviously, providing value and doing it for a long time. You have other people that you could point to that are, experts
Respected.
in the field and respected, but
there's a lot to unpack there.
I was on his site. I emailed them. Right?
You're being modest, but there's a lot. You're an amazing copywriter, and so there's a lot that goes into sending a short, to the point, succinct email to someone who's very busy and probably receives a ton of emails and a ton of solicitations, and persuading them that they should give up some of their time in order to spend some time with you. Yeah. But the actual fact that you're going to be highlighting them on a podcast is tremendously powerful, way more powerful than, hey, can I pick your brain? Can I have some of your time? Something like that. So Derek Sivers, anyway, someone I admired for a while. He has this great story about, he was actually at Berklee College of Music in Boston studying as a music student. And this music industry executive comes up from New York to speak to his class one evening. And he takes the train up or something, or drives up or something like that. And he gets there, it's like 6:00, and the class is about to start. And he says to the professor, oh, I thought we were going to eat first. And the professor's like, no, it's time to eat. It's time to teach. We're doing the class. And so the guy hadn't eaten all day and he was starving. And so Derek, he's like, light bulb moment. And he steps out of the class. And this is like 20, 25 years ago or something. So it wasn't like you could hop on your phone like you could these days. But he steps out of the class and he goes and he calls the local pizza place. He says, I'd like to order 2 pizzas. Please bring them down to this classroom, which they did. And the guy, the teacher there, was so grateful to him for ordering these 2 pizzas. Afterwards, at the end of the class, he points at Derek and says, you, come on over here. And he said, that was great what you did. I really appreciate you doing that. If you ever make it to New York City, look me up. And, Derek wants to break into the music industry. So this is executive, super, influential. And sure enough, it ended up leading to all kinds of job opportunities and became a big mentor for him. So that's a great story and a great lesson about the importance of going the extra mile for the people that could be influential and a big impact on your career.
I love that story. That's great.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with free pizza either, even if they don't ask for it.
Yeah.
I was actually talking to someone, one of the people I interviewed, and they said a company was reaching out to try and get their business. And what they did was they sent their staff and them several pizzas during lunchtime, unannounced, with the card in it. I love that. Lumpy mail at its finest, edible mail.
Yeah.
Louis Schiff.
Louis Schiff is the CEO of Birthing of Giants. He talked about the importance of taking moonshots. That's the name of one of his programs, Moonshots and Moneymakers, which is really about aiming much higher than you would normally aim. And then also the importance of surrounding yourself with others who aren't going to think that your moonshot is crazy or that it's unattainable, and who are going to have your back. They're going to encourage you. They're going to give you advice and resources and help you to get there. So that's what I took away from that conversation.
I think that's an overarching theme, John, for all of my interviews, which is it just makes me think bigger.
Sure.
However I thought before, and then you have someone who's done just amazing things and over, and people who took chances and just did amazing things with their company. It's like, wow. And a lot of these people, they're not any smarter than you typically. They don't work any harder than you typically. So it's great to be around people that think bigger, that are doing cool things.
Yeah.
Promote.
Yeah. Raheja. Yeah. And just following on that point there, we talked to many people who say they want to start a podcast, but first they need to figure things out, right? They say like, first I need to figure out whatever, insert whatever objection, what the name of my show is. I've talked to people who said like, I've been thinking about starting a podcast for the last 3 years or 5 years, but I can't come up with a name. In our book, really not something that should be holding up doing an actual podcast, but there are many people that, hold back on doing that. And for us, it's really about the relationships. That's really the key critical piece about it. But Pramod Raheja, so he's been a pilot for 20 plus years for United Airlines, is a serial entrepreneur, founded multiple companies. The lesson I got from this interview with him was that, his latest company is a company that produces drones for commercial purposes. And, initially they're thinking some of the applications might be security. So you think on the outside of a military base, having drones on the outside, instead of having, places where you'd have a person who could fall asleep or could miss something. This has greater visibility. So that might be one of the applications. But when COVID hit, they realized there were other opportunities. For example, people approached them about using drones to clean large indoor spaces, because one of the differentiators about them is that their drones work in indoor spaces, because most drones, apparently they operate on GPS, which requires being outside, but his work inside. So they could go, for example, to an indoor stadium. And initially he thought, well, how are they going to carry cleaning supplies and spray down and stuff like that? But it wasn't. It was actually UV light. So it could have a really bright light and then use that for cleaning and decontaminating indoor spaces. So it's kind of a really unexpected opportunity. So, but the point I think that I take away from that is that you may not know where your market is going, but he made a decision to go into this industry, which combines some of his other interests like aviation, which is obviously his background as a pilot. But he saw that this was a growth industry because the drone industry has been growing tremendously. So he may not have known exactly where it's going, but he knew that it was growing, and then it might lead to other applications, as it did, like, cleaning, which was something that obviously he didn't anticipate. So that was the lesson I took from that.
No one anticipated a pandemic either, where you would literally need UV light to clean stadiums.
Certainly not. Yeah, it would have been pretty prophetic if they had thought of that.
So I have one last question before I ask it. I don't know if there's any other interviews that you think about when you look at this past year, or any stories that stick out.
It goes back to taking the time to have a great conversation with someone that you admire, you respect. And there's so many people like that. I mean, Rob Maischon, I interviewed this year, someone I've known for a long time, and just never took the time to interview him. And, again, if I hadn't doubled the number of output, I probably wouldn't have taken the time to interview him. But I reached out during the year and had a great conversation. A really smart guy. So that's one for sure. Carl Arnold, amazing guy. He built a business to over 100 million, a hospitality business. They would build hotels, but he loved the security of longer term contracts. So they built these hotels that were like next to railroad stations, and they would get contracts with these railroad stations to house some of the people who worked for the railroads who had to do an overnight, kind of like in aviation, you have a flight crew that needs to do an overnight. So in that sense, it kind of became a B2B option for him. And so I think that was really smart. That was a great one. Who else comes up? Oh, Justin Breen, who from Chicago, former journalist turned PR specialist. And the funny thing is, really, what he really is a connector, and he uses making connections, making introductions as his currency, just like you and I do. But he's amazing at it in order to lead to additional opportunities for him.
One of my favorite books I like, Blitzscaling. And you actually had one of the co-authors.
Yeah, Chris Ye. Yeah. Chris Ye, co-author with Reid Hoffman, Blitzscaling, founder of LinkedIn. He joked that, if you're going to put out a book and you want to make it a bestseller, co-author it with a billionaire. That's a great way to get a best-selling book. Real smart guy, real hardworking, worked in the startup game for a long time, but really good at also building relationships. Did
he talk about how he knew Reid Hoffman or anything like that? Or?
I can't remember exactly how they got to know each other, but I know years ago when he graduated, I think it was when he graduated from college, he ended up starting a in-person networking group for alumni of his college in Silicon Valley. And it ended up kind of taking off, and a lot of people came to it. I think like Elon Musk came to some of the events that he organized. And of course, as the organizer, you are the glue for that organization. And, I'm sure it didn't start small, huge. It was a couple of people getting together for drinks, and eventually got bigger and bigger. And so that insight, he ended up growing a really big network. And I think it was through that he eventually ended up meeting Reid Hoffman, if I remember correctly.
So I guess I just have to ask you the question that you ask your guests at the end of your show, which is, if someone's at an award banquet, Oscars or Emmys, and you're being awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award for everything you've done.
Oh, man.
What everyone wants to know, who do you thank, right? There's colleagues, there's friends, there's mentors, peers, business partners. But, we'll just assume you're going to thank your mom and dad and your spouse and your kids, and everything. But from a business perspective, who do you want to thank that is a mentor or colleague that has had an impact?
Man, I've never been asked that question before. I've asked it hundreds of times, but I've never been asked it. So now I have appreciation for how hard it is. Well,
exactly.
You certainly, number one would be you, because, you are my business partner and friend, and we've come a long ways. And so I'm super grateful to you, and you're constantly
we know each other's secrets too much. So you have to say that.
Exactly. And you're a great inspiration, and you motivate me to work harder. And so that I appreciate that a lot. And another person that comes to mind is Tony Rulli, who, he and I worked together when it really my foundational transitional period from practicing law to, building, I don't know what you call that phase of time, when I was doing a lot of webinars
more like a
and selling digital
business
courses. Yeah, digital business, exactly. And he helped tremendously at that time. He's still a good friend. Kevin Waldron, also, who's been a longtime friend and mentor. Hope to see you again, Kevin, sometime soon.
I would buy a book with Waldronisms.
I know. We've been bugging him for years to do that, come out with more content.
Oh my God.
He is, unfortunately, he likes to be a little bit of a secret. We try and get him to come out of his shell and share his wisdoms, because we had him, he came to a number of our events. It was great. And then, finally beyond that, I would just thank our team that we have right now. We've got a great team behind us that about 25 now that are helping us to really, and it gets back to that purpose piece we were talking about with Fran Biederman Gross. What's your purpose? And our purpose is really to help people to build life-changing relationships, with friends, with business partners, with referral partners, and really to network in a smarter way, build tremendous relationships with people. And so I'm so grateful to our team for helping us to do that and have a bigger impact than we ever could before, on our own, certainly.
Yeah, I think some of the people that have given us advice, I think you would agree, like Dan Cushell and Ian Garlic, who, when we have questions, I remember, Dan was a Sherpa at one of our events too. And I remember us sitting around the table after the event at lunch and him giving us feedback, candid feedback on what he liked, what he thought we can improve. And he always does that.
Yeah. I thank you for reminding me. Both of them were guests in prior years on my podcast, and both a big influence on us and our business and helping really a mutual beneficial relationship. I hope they would both say where it's a two-way street, and whenever we get on the phone with either of them, that we're seeking to deliver value to one another. So
there was also a cold email on LinkedIn, a cold message on LinkedIn that I sent him, and he responded. And like you said, it's not just, I just sent him a cold email. Obviously, you think about how you craft that email, the elements you put in that email or that message. And I ended up meeting up with him actually in Arizona at the Genius Network headquarters, and met him, and I met Joe Polish, and, I hung out there for a half a day. And since then we've become great friends.
Yeah. And Ian Garlic is someone who we knew somewhat, and he passed him in the halls at a conference, and we ended up having a much longer conversation with him. And a lot has come from that relationship. So it's great.
Anyone else that you think of? I mean, I'm sure we can go on and on, or is that the end of your speech? Is the bell going off?
That's the end of my speech. Yeah. The orchestra has taken me off the stage now.
Well, thanks for sharing a podcast year in review. And I just want to point people towards more episodes of smartbusinessrevolution.com. Check out, if you have questions about podcasting or thinking about doing it, go to rise25.com, and I'll give a selfless plug for go to inspiredinsider.com.
Of course.
But all roads lead back to Rise25 anyway, so that's fine. Check all of them out. There's amazing episodes of guests sharing all these gems and lessons. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.